Welcome, everybody. It's a truly prestigious event, so it's a real privilege for all of us on the stage to be able to be here. I have the whole DevRel team with me today, so I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
First time in a while, isn't it?
Yeah. It's your second DevRel AMA, right?
Yeah. First time with Serinko. Last one was only with Max and you. So I'm excited.
Oh, so this is the first one. This is the first full house.
Amazing.
Yep.
All right, so maybe let's get started. Max, if you're ready for that, let's get started with the usual release updates and dev updates.
Okay, so this is usually the bit of the poll where I go through the changelog. Our release cycle has been a little bit turbulent of late, mostly just because it's the summer, and last week it was partially due to we had an issue with one of the deployment runners that we've since fixed. As I said, it's been a little bit irregular for the moment. Now, in terms of the wallet, one thing I do want to draw attention to, which has already come out a little bit from some of the community members, people have noticed this, we released the feature that you could test your node, right? Which is basically this idea that you could dictate which node you want to test by its identity key, and then you could just send a load of packets there. However, a couple of people have run into problems with this on the desktop app. This is just because of like network permissioning and stuff in kind of like different builds of the app for different operating systems. So what we're going to be doing, just so everyone is aware, we're working on fixing this, and we may be migrating to a more web-based node tester, as opposed to doing it from inside of the web wallet itself, just because then we can kind of dictate the security environment a bit better. Otherwise, yeah, apart from this, we haven't had a platform release for a while. We did have some stuff added to the Nym CLI, which was adding some signing support in the upcoming releases. Then we are hopefully very soon going to have mixfetch. So this is kind of going to be a big thing in the TypeScript SDK, but this is a future thing, not a past thing. So I'll move away from that. Otherwise, yep. We have had some new additions to NymConnect in terms of what it supports. We've had a couple of different matrix servers added to the whitelist, and there's been a little bit of updating happening. There is some unreleased stuff, but obviously it's all happening in GitHub, so you can all see it anyway with regards to the docs. And there's going to be quite a big shakeup with the docs coming soon, and hopefully everything will kind of become a little bit more streamlined and a less labyrinthian. But yeah, we could talk about that later if it comes up, or I can let Serinko talk about it because he's the one doing it. I think that's about it. Looking through the changelog, yeah, I think I've talked about everything else. Yeah.
Amazing. Thanks for the update. Should we dive straight into the community questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's go. So Supermay is asking, who actually gave a talk about Nym recently, and he didn't have an answer to this question, which came up from the audience. When the mixnet goes into paid mode, who's going to issue the bandwidth credentials? What is going to dictate the bandwidth prices?
Okay, cool.
Great question.
Bandwidth credentials are going to be just generated by one single party or one single entity, right? Because obviously that would be a little bit of a risk in terms of, any kind of malicious actor, right? Any kind of malicious party. Maybe, if you had a single party and that single party decided to be a dick and try and de-anonymize people, that's obviously an issue. So credential generation itself will happen through the magic of DKG, which is distributed key generation. And what this means is that certain members of the validator set, or like people who choose to run the credential generation software code, right, that we'll write, then as someone essentially asks for a credential to be made, then when you're wanting to make a credential, you can essentially set how many kind of authorities there are. These are the people who actually create a part of the credential, right, which is then combined together into the secret key that is the credential. So the idea is that different parts of it will be made by different parties. No one will have full overview or know exactly what this key is. So that's how the generation will kind of be happening and be distributed. I'm just trying to find the second half of the question. I've lost it in all the other questions, which is a nice problem to have, isn't it?
So who is going to issue the bandwidth credentials, and what is going to dictate the bandwidth prices?
This kind of set of validators, right, who are running the kind of credential generation software, they'll be issuing them. What's going to dictate the bandwidth prices is a very good question. This is probably something that will be set. I imagine it'll either be set in a smart contract or just via a governance vote. but not 100% sure on that one.
I think that still the details of that are still being ironed out. So is that a soon TM, Max?
It's not a TM. It's like, and the underlying question underneath your questions, right, is like, how secure is it going to be? And the answer will be, this price will not be arbitrarily set by the validators who make credentials, right? It will be set in a way that's like open through, like I said, either a smart contract or a governance vote or a smart contract controlled by governance. You know, it'll be set in a kind of in a transparent and communal way. That answers essentially the underlying question of those questions. So yeah, not soon TM. It will happen in a decentralized way.
It feels like you got bored with the soon TM meme. You keep pushing back on it. I still like it though, so I'm gonna keep using it. Sorry about
I
that.
can't do it anymore, but that's okay. You do it to your husband.
Okay, I'll limit it. Let's agree on a 50-50 split. All right, next question from Sam Francis is about hardware wallets, which I think comes up fairly often. This is very much on the community's mind. I think we may have even answered this question before. When will Nym integrate with hardware wallets? He's asking this because he lost quite a bit of funds because of a hack.
Yeah, as I've said before, no hard deadline quite yet. There is some stuff in the works. There's stuff in the works, no hard deadline. But on the horizon, that's all I can say.
What does it require to integrate Nym into a hardware wallet?
It depends on the setup of the providers, really. If you're talking about the interesting thing with Nym and Nyx, both of these tokens, right, is because they're just like Cosmos, they're Cosmos SDK chain native tokens. And what's nice about that is that all of these Cosmos tokens share the same coin type. The way that, for instance, Ledger is basically differentiating between these coins. Obviously, some, not all coins are created equal. They all maybe have different like prefixing schemes and, different, maybe like slightly different keys, types of key that are used for public and private keys and like all of this different stuff, which kind of differentiates Bitcoin and Monero and Zcash and whatever, Ethereum tokens and ETH and all of this crap, right? But the wonder of Cosmos chains is that all of these coins are essentially the same type. That reduces the load quite a lot. So that's from like the technical side. However, obviously you also need the underlying infrastructure. So you'll probably need something like whatever RPC nodes or something that the wallet will already use, will kind of default to using maybe, or it can also depend on the other stuff kind of around that. So, for instance, maybe the hardware provider would want to like run a node on your system to be included in theirs, or all of this kind of stuff that is not necessarily like a hard technical requirement, but like the surrounding requirement for this kind of stuff. So it can really vary. But the fact that it's a Cosmos chain really works in our favor here.
Thanks for the answer. Makes total sense. Next question. This is from Palmflake. Hi there, Palmflake. Good to see you. I think this is a follow-up on your release highlights / intro part. Web-based tester API ? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
So it'll basically just be like using the WASM client, right? The WebAssembly client that you can run in a browser through the SDK as well, through the TypeScript SDK. We can build a node tester with that you can run via a web app, right? Instead of having it in the desktop wallet, which has been causing some problems with, permissioning and stuff, like I said before, which, a couple of people have had some issues with it. We can also move it to a web environment, and then that can also grant a bit more flexibility and ease of use for people. Do you want me to go over like how testing the node would actually work as well? I feel like I've gone over it a lot, but like maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that would actually make sense. Maybe some people haven't heard about the node tester yet.
Okay, so testing the uptime of your node is actually quite an interesting question in a system like Nym, because all traffic goes through 3 hops. It goes through 3 mix nodes, it goes through 2 gateways, or the same gateway twice, right? So then actually testing the responsiveness or the uptime of the node becomes a more interesting question, because it's not just like, I can shoot a shitload of packets at this node, see how many it returns, kind of like the ping utility that you use on your own computer. You want to check your network uptime. You just ping like 8888, you ping like the Google DNS server or whatever, some big DNS server that's up, you send it a load of packets, you see how many come back, and you see how long it takes for them to come back, right? And from that, you can kind of test your own connectivity. We can't quite immediately do just that, the straight one-to-one analog of that with a mix node, because traffic has to move through all of these hops when it's going through the mixnet, right? So what basically happens is you kind of like construct a couple of paths with the mix node in different places, in those paths, and then you send, I think it's 50,000 packets, but I'm not sure. It doesn't really matter. You send a bunch of packets to it, and essentially all you do is you like set up like a round robin trip. So you just like send yourself a shitload of packets through a couple of different paths that have the mix node you're trying to test in that path at different layers, right? In different hops. And then from that, you can then kind of make a, you can see obviously like if they all come back, then it's great because the whole path is kind of looking good. Then maybe if it's not that great, then you could like test another path, and like maybe you were going through a back gateway or something like this. So it becomes like slightly more of a kind of a probabilistic thing rather than just like being able to one-to-one like ping a load of packets at just one mix node and get it to send them directly back to you. This is how the rewarding system works. The network monitor, which is part of the Nym API, which validators will also be running in the future. So this is also work is happening on distributing this, and we can kind of get into this if people want to, because it's a bit of a rabbit hole. Right now on the Nym API, which is run by one of the validators, then this is essentially what's happening, right? This network monitor just does this. So for every mix node, it just, I think it's every 15 minutes, it just like rattles out a load of packets to itself via that node. And it sees how many it got back and sees how many were dropped. And from that, start to build up the kind of the uptime score of a node. We're just doing that, but like kind of taking that functionality out and putting it in a web app or something like this.
Well, that was actually really thorough, and I myself didn't know this. So once again, I'm learning something on these AMAs. Good to be here. Thanks, Max. Next question, also from Palmflake. He's asking whether there's any documentation on how to get wallet/delegation info from the next chain. How to query that, I think he means.
What exactly do you mean by like wallet delegation info? What the delegations of a particular mix node are?
Or of a particular wallet is, or wallet are, I think so.
That's an interesting question. Seeing the delegations of another wallet. I'm not 100% sure how you do. Well, I mean, you could probably like query the smart contract. Let me have if Alexia and Serinko, if you want to answer the next couple of questions, I can go off on a little individual study trip. Okay, there's no like immediate docs right now. I mean, maybe there's something. I'll double check in the validator API. Maybe there's something in there in the Swagger API, but no like written up guide as of yet. Like, you can definitely see it on the NodeScrew Explorer. So there is a way. It's just how succinct that way of doing that is. The question, I suppose, that I will try and answer for you right now.
All right. So then the next question is for either Serinko or Alexia. What will happen to NymConnect once we have the full VPN-like version available?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Max, but I think that's still in the works. We don't yet have an answer on that, as far as I know.
The NymConnect app, as we currently know it, will be kind of like folded into a multi-functional app, I think. But that's the end goal, right? So before we get there, then we're going to be iterating quite quickly and testing out different versions with the community. So if there's something, basically test it out, tell us what you think. You will have some agency in deciding the direction that we actually end up at with where NymConnect goes, which is cool.
All right, so next one. This is a good one. Also interesting to me. Can we use IPFS over Nym? Serinko, can we?
I've seen a question and I must answer that I do not know the answer. It's a good question. I've never tried. It's a good thing to. I would assume we can, but I would pass it to Max.
We can. There is actually some. I mean, it depends on exactly what you mean by use IPFS. If you mean can I through the mixnet interact with IPFS, so like read and write to IPFS, then there is actually a branch. There's an old branch of a developer tutorial that was like starting to do this. It was never fully fleshed out, but in terms of the actual functionality, yes, 100%, you totally can. If we take the TypeScript service provider, right, that's in developer tutorials, if we take that as an example, then at the moment, all that does, right, that's just a very simple thing to just kind of show you how the interaction between the service and the mixnet works, okay? And all you would do in there would be, let me backtrack. Whenever you're thinking about these kinds of questions, can I interact with X via the mixnet? Can I do X via the mixnet, right? A mixnet is a transport layer. So all you really have to think of is like, if you can remotely interact with IPFS now, via a service, then you will be able to interact with IPFS via a service via the mixnet. You know what I mean? Because all you're doing is, instead of directly pinging a service or directly pinging IPFS, then you create a service that does the interaction on your behalf and passes messages back to you through the mixnet, right? So in a way, you could think of the services for interacting with stuff like IPFS, you could think of them almost as a proxy, right? But the proxy has the mixnet in between you. The proxy doesn't know who you are because it replies to you with serbs, all of this kind of stuff. This is something that will hopefully become clearer in the next couple of days. I'm hoping to get like a simple, the first of the Rust SDK tutorials out, and there will be, it's laying the ground for something pretty sexy. And since there is also a Rust IPFS library, I could also, if this is something that's interesting to a lot of people, then I could kind of add that to my list, maybe, to like write up a quick thing of how you would do this. And then if people look on the developer portal as well, if we look at the community apps, there is something called Nym Drive. And the code there is actually also interacting with IPFS through the mixnet. So yes, you can. And just think of it as asking a proxy service to interact with IPFS on your behalf. Overall, big thumbs up. You can. There's a demo of it in the community applications, and it's called Nym Drive.
Moving on to the next one. Maybe this one is for Serinko. What is the current focus of the DevRel team, Nick is asking, and what is the main priority at the moment?
All right, let's split that one. I can start on my side. Well, coming back from marathons of summer events, meaning conferences and all the nice talks, hello everyone who we had met in person, settle down and going over documentation and basically trying to break it into more readable and nicer, simpler version of different documentations which we have. So we're currently finishing up a new operators guide kind of book, which will be running aside of the main documentation and the developers documentation which we already have. So that's gonna be pretty exciting. On top of that, we're gonna be building or creating some content manuals in how to spin up X nodes, gateways, network requesters, validators in more accessible way for those who perhaps have difficulties to read docs and stuff like that. I don't know if you're gonna end up with some more videos and stuff. Everything's possible. And looking towards the horizon of the upcoming Shipyard Academy, which as everyone here can share, I'll participate on this side of onboarding operators. So we definitely want to see more of a decentralized mixnet in larger numbers, but also in larger amount of places. So all across the globe, get it out of Europe, get it out of North America, and see new operators running new form of private internet by default all over the globe. So that's the end goal. But basically my part on that is to figure out how to get you all who not yet running mixnet, gateway, or network requester know how to do that.
We add something to this too, though, before you jump in.
Yeah, of course. I was just about to ask you what you have been busy with.
Well, as you all know, some of you know, we have the community grants program running as well, which is a soft launched version of another program that we hope to launch around September, October. But so far, as Serinko mentioned, most of our focus is put into the documentation improvements and also reworking the new structure for the Shipyard Academy 2.0. And so Max, as far as I know, will be focusing mostly on the Rust SDK, so documentation, examples, tutorials, etc. Then I'll be doing the same for the TypeScript SDK, while Serinko will be focusing mostly on operators, guides, and tutorials and tools.
Great question, Nick. Great answers as well. Thank you both. Moving on to the next one. It's from No Dump Node. Good to see you, bro. Can I already deploy Cosmwasm contracts on the next chain? This is actually a good one. I got this before from others as well.
There's still some legal stuff happening behind the scenes before we can fully open the next chain up, right? And there's a couple of other questions to do with next chain and opening up as well in the chat that I've noticed, so I'll just kind of like answer all of them at once, if that's okay. Right now, Nix is not being freely distributed, right? Nix is the staking token of the chain, and that's because of this aforementioned legal stuff. And until we do that, or after we do that, then all of the stuff that you would expect, so the kind of the contract uploading and all of this will, and also like other validators being able to join, that will all happen then, right? And I saw a question deeper down as well from Melva regarding like the actual, like essentially the consensus distribution, right? Because the chain runs on a proof of stake consensus mechanism, right? With the idea that those validators who have a larger chunk of stake will basically produce more blocks, right? It'd be like a bigger chunk of consensus. And the goal of these systems is to never let single party have more than 33% of consensus power, right? You know, in terms of the consensus layer, then we're not doing anything. There's nothing kind of unique Nym with regards to the chain consensus itself, right? The chain consensus is normal proof of stake consensus mechanism. And yes, exactly to answer your question, Bauer, then, you know, new validators can basically get delegations. There is again, this is a Cosmos SDK chain thing. There is a delegation functionality there so that people can, you know, stake on particular validators. Those validators can become joint consensus and become part of producing and securing, you know, the shared history that everyone agrees upon. And yeah, this is a normal Cosmos SDK thing. So people kind of delegate, get a share of the rewards as dictated by the validator that they're delegating to. And then that validator will also have this increase in delegation power that will also give it a greater weight when it comes to governance proposals as well. I think that answers all of it.
I'll try to identify all the other questions that this answered. So if I'm asking something that you already answered with this, then please just let me know and we'll skip. Next one, also a good one. Any update on zk-nyms and specifically when mainnet, sir? Do we have an update on that?
Your favorite phrase, unfortunately.
Soon TM, folks. Soon TM. Obviously, zk-nyms is very important for Nym. It's one of our core technologies. And as you know, zk-nyms will be the thing that will end up enabling bandwidth credentials. So before the mixnet goes paid, obviously, zk-nyms will also have to go on mainnet. But there's a few things that need to happen before that. So stay tuned for updates regarding this.
You should probably drop the demo we were playing with today, as even not all of us were familiar with that one.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Okay. Wait, where do I find? Can you Sirinku please dig up a link to it while I ask the next question?
Like my CPU is completely banged by building on the side of this call, so I cannot start the chat right now. It will kill my computer and I will disappear from this call. I'm very sorry for that.
Yeah.
Oh, it's in the chat? Oh, amazing.
It'll be on the dev wall next Tuesday when we release. There's a sneak peek for everyone in there. I just dropped this thing in. It's called Coco Demo, and it basically kind of lets you play around with creating a credential, right? Because the code for generating a credential exists already, right? The thing that is, as with all stuff, you know, making stuff private and privacy preserving is the thing that takes the most time. You know, that's what the DKG stuff, the distributed key generation stuff, that other validators will be running. That's the thing that's taking a while, right? To be able to create these credentials in a way that is also privacy preserving to the person who is asking for the credential. A little question about this as well from them. Node. Does this mean that validators on Nix will have to check the uptime of nodes and propose new blocks and sign to, you know, create these partial shared secrets that then become credentials? Yes, basically. This is some additional stuff. It won't necessarily be everyone. The details of that are still being kind of worked out, but the option to do this will be there.
And by the way, because I see a lot of new faces in the audience, welcome everybody who's here for the first time. You may be wondering what the connection between the Workoco and zk-nyms is. So one of the foundational technologies that Nym is based on and that ended up forming the company Nym was a credential scheme called Coconut Credentials. Some of our founders were working on this research before they were formed, and then the implementation of those are zk-nyms basically. So zk-nyms are based on the Coconut credentials. Now you know. Moving on to the next question. This is actually also a good one from Pomflake once again. Any news on incentivized gateways?
Not that I'm aware of yet.
Same.
Once again, I'll drop you my favorite meme, soon TM. Gateway incentives, of course, are going to be important for the mixnet overall, but there are no additional details, at least not publicly yet. No dump node, whether Nym is at Cosmo versus Istanbul, I don't think so. Do you guys know whether we're going to be attending?
I'm definitely not there. I don't know if others are.
I don't know if we are in general, to be honest. I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I probably would know, but Serinko became our new event person, so we're sending him to every event in the world. So probably if we were there, Serinko would be there. So the fact that he isn't, we can conclude that Nym. Maybe next time though, no dumb node.
I say the same jokes, which are internationally funny. So please come to some of those events. Like we're gonna have a lot of fun.
Definitely.
I don't drink. I have bad English, but at least we can have fun.
I can attest to that. Serinko is kind of fun.
Love the kind of.
You gotta be honest, you can't lie to people. Yeah, I actually don't really understand the next question. Maybe you guys can untangle it with me. So I may take a doubt about the delegation rewards. Are they automatically considered for the next cycle, or do I have to click some button? And if so, how often does this happen? 10 out of 10, which is the minimum, or is any amount of reward already being considered equal to compound interest? I think what is being asked here is compounding rewards to delegations and then auto compounding.
Yeah, that's how I read it too. Unfortunately, I don't know the answer. Maybe Max?
Do you mean like, do you have to press a button to compound your rewards? Is that the question?
Yeah.
You used to have to. Before we did what was internally known as the Godzilla upgrade to the mixnet contract. We should have externally called it as well, because it's a cool fucking name for a contract upgrade. But yeah, you used to have to manually compound them. You as a user didn't necessarily have to, but like we had something running under the hood that compounded them. But now this happens automatically. So yeah, basically all you have to worry about is withdrawing them yourself. Because we don't do auto withdrawals. You have to actually pull out your accrued rewards yourself, because otherwise we'd be making like thousands of transactions once an hour at the end of every epoch. And that's a lot of gas fees. So yeah.
Yeah, the last time I checked, though, just an additional comment on this, I think the UI was not great in the wallet, so it was not very obvious that new rewards are actually compounded and generate rewards after themselves, if that makes sense. Not sure whether that was fixed. I know that it was planned to be fixed.
I think it has. I was in the wallet the other day, and the UI seems intuitive. But then again, I've also been in this for 2 years, so maybe it takes someone who's not been on the project for this long and can see the woods for the trees to tell us whether it's clear or not. So yeah, tell us, let us know. If it's not intuitive or if it's a bit confusing, then tell us, and we'll try and make it less confusing.
Exactly. Your feedback is much appreciated. The next question is from Emil, who's one of our Ninja cadets. And the question is about AI. He's very interested in AI in general. And he's asking, can you please tell me if Nym is considering using AI in its operations? Not, can we fantasize a bit about this topic, Nym and AI, a breakthrough in the future? Do we know anything about this?
And not planning on using it in any of our operations thus far.
Thanks.
Not a huge amount of crossover necessarily between or rather, okay, I'd say the crossover between utilizing AI and, let's say, anti-surveillance perspective, the tech that we're building now has. There is the narrow crossover then, I think, and that is quite interesting. That's not necessarily something we're looking at. If this is something that's interesting to you, though, I saw a very cool thing on, of course, Twitter the other day. Where else do you get all of your information about everything?
Sorry, Max, it's called X. You saw an X on X. That's how you say it now.
I saw on Twitter that someone for, I think one of the last ZK hack, built a microphone that, using zero knowledge proofs, you could basically verify that the audio hadn't been tampered with, and you could also verify the fact that the audio had come from a particular person because that person signed a key was used in the construction of the proof that then you can verify was this person, which I think is quite cool. Not necessarily a privacy thing, more a verification thing. Yeah, kind of interesting. Oh, actually, one other thing. Sorry, there's an interesting project called Kagi right now, Kagi, which are they're actually a privacy preserving search engine, but they're looking into AI tools, which is kind of interesting. I'm not exactly sure what, but yeah, it's interesting to see the crossover between the two things, because but some of the crossover is also bad, like WorldCoin, and both being that and ChatGPT being made by the same person. Yeah, which is kind of nightmarish. But so yeah, that's the dark side of the crossover, or the dark side of AI, whatever, masquerading under zk washing.
Exactly. We have a recent blog post about this. Hopefully one of our dear community managers can share it in the chat. It's very interesting. It's an opinion piece by our CSO Jaya. Give it a read. All right, moving on to the next question. What's on the roadmap for Nym in 2023? Price is asking.
I think the main thing we mentioned already, and that is to roll out with a solution where the NymConnect will become to be a larger application, which in the back, what it's doing, your system-wide internet connection is running through that, right? So you're running an entire internet connection, entire internet traffic from your computer through the mixnet. So that's to shift from having some application service providers, someone have you SDKs into like the full scope of internet, and hopefully enlarge the amount of mixed nodes to having enough bandwidth to be able to doing so. And of course, there is a constant conflict between anonymity and speed that will exist. That's like organic outcome. So a user will be able to choose themselves whether they want to go in full anon privacy mode, which of course will be limited. You can imagine that might be hard for having a multi-people video call or watching movies on that. And why would you do so? But then you can switch basically like a slide button into another two options, which one will be like, even Steven, another one will be like the speed mode, in which you're gonna sacrifice some of the deep security for gonna have less mixing, smaller anonymity set, but you're gonna be able to go faster. That's basically like our end goal towards which we're building right now.
Yeah, this is a trade-off that came off on many of these DevRel AMAs. Of course, with the mixnet working how it works, there is a definite trade-off in latency and speed, and then it only makes sense to make it user configurable, depending on your individual needs. Obviously, the big major thing that will happen, probably one of the biggest thing that's ever happened to Nym so far, is going to be the launch of our general purpose use case, which Sarinko just mentioned. And if you look at our blog post about the roadmap, there's also a lot of work in terms of integrations. So obviously the mixnet, besides a VPN-like use case, has various other uses. For example, libp2p integration, which we partnered with ChainSafe for, which solves privacy for Ethereum validators, which is a very real problem for the Ethereum blockchain in terms of possible censorship and different types of attacks. The mixnet, as being something that provides network layer privacy, has all sorts of possibilities to integrate into existing things. So these are the two main things that are happening this year. Can you guys please drop a link to the blog post so that people who are interested can read a bit further into it? And then moving on to the next question, unless you guys have any comments on this.
No.
All right, this is actually a good one, and it's aimed at you, Alexia. So Nick is asking, what is the coolest submission at the moment among community grant applications in terms of DevRel? And what kind of submissions would you like to see more?
That's a really good question. I mean, so far we've had like really qualitative and very diverse submissions. We unfortunately have mostly accepted the ones that had to do with content because, as mentioned, that first iteration of the grants program is more community oriented. So the idea was either to work on localizations, aka translations, creating more content, focusing on the Shipyard Academy. So we've accepted 8 applications so far. We are still open for a few more. I don't personally have any favorites. I can't say, even if I had one. So I'm not going to say anything. Sorry. But we actually have an article that went live, I believe it was last week. Wait, I'm posting it here. Most of them are content related. So you'll see that there's a few on translating content. We have one that is a little bit different from the others, which will be carried by Jose David, title of which is Observatory for Digital Democracy and Citizenship Rights, which basically aims at localizing the idea of privacy in LATAM and building a narrative around, Nym and privacy, and sort of also identifying how we should position, ourselves and the stack for the LATAM audience. And I think this is quite interesting because it touches upon a lot of different topics. It's not necessarily only content related, but it also has to do with human psyche and societal stuff, which is pretty interesting. But again, every grant was great. All the grantees are, super reactive. I've been in touch with a few. I still need to send out contract agreements. Sorry about that. We just had to clear out a bunch of stuff internally. I'm just waiting for JS green light and then we're good to go. So very excited. Thanks again to everyone and very excited to see the first milestones and the first results.
Adding on to that, before I repeat the next question, which I think is also important, localization is in general. So localizing the privacy narrative is something that is very important to Nym and privacy in general. So what we notice we have a global community in many countries across basically all the continents that are out there. What we notice is that, for Europe and for the States, so for the West in general, privacy-focused conversations are very much about the NSA and that kind of mass surveillance. And what we realize is that it doesn't really speak to someone in Latin America often, or especially someone in Africa. So it is super important to find ways to convey the message of privacy and find people to fight this really important cause. It's really great to see that it's happening in the form of grants.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually really curious to see the results of Jose David's research, to be honest. Because, I'm half Mexican. I haven't been in Mexico for a while, but I'm really curious to see how people consider privacy and what's the real need behind. Of course, we have a few ideas, but really, I know that he's gonna be running, I think like up to 15 or 20 interviews with activists, experts, and officials there. So I think that the input that we're gonna get is gonna be super educative for us.
And now on to the next question, Alexia. What kind of submissions would you like to see more of?
Great question. We were actually discussing that a little bit earlier with Sarinka, Max, and Jaya in regards to Shipyard 2.0. I don't know if it's still up in the air, Sarinka, but do we need localization of guys that you're working on the service providers, operators, in Spanish, for example? Because I'm having an AMA next week. Maybe that's something I can push, since it's pretty stable documentation, basically.
We're not out with a new book just yet, so I will wait. We're very close, but we will enroll it when it's without mistakes and everything's going good, which might be tomorrow or with the next release, which is Tuesday morning, correct? So I will wait for that, because that is work towards being more stable. There's versions changing and the console output, but that's all automatized and should be not really related necessarily to the content of the markdown itself. So yes, of course, after that, this will be very helpful to get us on front of non-English speaking community, particularly people who want to become operators and understand why, how, and what to do to become operators. I think this is going to be perfect, both in direction south and east from Europe or North America and countries like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And also, we're also always very happy to get submissions in regards to ideas or contents or participation for Shipyard Academy 2.0. So if anyone wants to participate, the grants program is still open. So feel free to drop in a little application.
And maybe a quick note on this, and correct me, I'm not the person to talk about the grants program at all. It's your remit, Alexia, but this was just a soft launch, right? So the actual launch is coming sometime October, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we still haven't defined the specifics of that, but so far this first V1, as we call it, is a soft launch version of, hopefully, fingers crossed, the more mature version that we will have coming out sometime October probably, or perhaps a bit later.
So then I guess, any RFPs that we put out are just our ideas of what needs to happen and what would be nice to see as community contributions, but people can also suggest RFPs. So
absolutely. So we have accepted grants that were direct responses to the RFPs that we put out, but also some that had nothing to do and that were more broadly positioning into localization matters, for example, or educational. So, we're pretty open as long as, the application is qualitative and the applicant has been part of the community. Usually these are the profiles that we've granted more easily because we knew people, we knew the quality of their work, we trusted them, and we have been able to build up a strong and long-lasting relationship for a while. But again, we're pretty open. If we see that there's potential, always happy to help.
Can't wait for the full launch of the grants program. Moving on to the next question, because we're kind of short on time. I'm not sure whether we actually know the answer to this one. This is from Prasan, our Indian ambassador, Ninja ambassador. Hi there. He's researching, trying to build something for partnership between Nym and Solana. And he did some research on Solana's way of handling traffic. Can you suggest a couple of things we can do? I'm not sure what this question actually means. Maybe pointing him in the right direction.
So first of all, it depends on what you're talking about when you say Solana, whether it's you want to integrate the mixnet functionality into a wallet, or whether you want to like build a service that lets you kind of like distribute stuff, broadcast transactions or something like this, right? Which, you know, there's a lot of crossover between those two use cases, admittedly, but they are still somewhat separate, right? Because you could have one without the other, even though you'd probably always want both. First thing to do would be, you know, if you're looking at a wallet, like looking at an already existing wallet, maybe a desktop wallet or something like this, the question would be, can you route the traffic? Does it have the possibility of being able to use a proxy, right? Most stuff that can use a proxy will be able to use the SOCKS 5 protocol. So immediately what you could try and do is you could try and you essentially set up a SOCKS 5 client, right? And you could either do that from the CLI using the SOCKS 5 client, or you could just use NymConnect as well. Although, no, actually don't use NymConnect because there aren't any open proxies in that. So, you know, you'd set up a SOCKS 5 client and you would then point the wallet traffic at that SOCKS 5 client. And then what you would need to do is you would need to then point that at a network requester. And this is assuming that your Solana transaction is actually being sent to an API, like an endpoint, in the same way that you have with, as opposed to directly broadcasting it to a validator, right? Because it's a slightly different kind of transaction, slightly different like message that you'll be sending through the network. So that's like the no code way, right? Just to check that it would actually work. And then if you're wanting to then do something deeper, that's when the SDKs come in, right? So we currently have an SDK in TypeScript. We have one in Rust. There has been some requests from the community for one in Go as well. I don't know whether we will internally do that, but maybe that could be a community effort, right? And so then what you would be doing is you would then be looking at whether you can like use these SDKs to essentially do the same thing, create a Nym client in the code processes of the wallet, and actually send all of that traffic through the mixnet to basically what I was talking about before, right? You have a service that kind of does this on your behalf. Okay, so if you're directly talking to a full node, something, I will admit, I'm really not sure of the architecture of Solana. I've never like messed around with Solana before. But, you know, if you're, you know, say if your wallet is going to gossip your transaction directly to a full node, then what you would do is you would need to like set up a little service that would do the gossiping for you, that would interact with the node on your behalf. And then kind of just, you would like sign your transaction locally and send the signed transaction to the service that would then broadcast it for you. Yeah, I'd start off with, if it can speak SOCKS 5, I am setting up this kind of like more manual way and just seeing if that works first. But come chat in the dev channel of Element of Matrix, and I can give you more specific details instead of doing it over the call. Paul like will either has an open proxy or will set up an open proxy for you as well. So yeah, that's how you'd start, I suppose. Sorry, very long-winded.
Okay. Thanks for that answer. Hopefully that answers your question, Prasan. Let us know if we managed. And then the last question, because we're nearing the end of this beautiful DevRel AMA here. This is a good one, and I think this is also one for you, Alexia. So can someone submit plans to organize a local meetup for devs, builders, representatives from other Web3 projects, etc., for community grant application?
That's a great question. I wouldn't see why not, but I would have to check with Caitlin, because I know that we are changing the ways in which we approach events organization, etc. So I'd have to double check with either her or Jaya and get back to you. But please feel free to ping me either here or on Element, and I'll answer with more details.
Actually, I can already tell you that there will at some point be, we don't know when yet, but definitely by the full launch of the community grants program, there will be a meetup community grant. What Caitlin, the person on the team who's responsible for events, is working on currently is basically the requirements and a pack of materials so that those meetups can be organized effectively. And you guys are helped with everything in terms of what the requirements are, and all the merch and everything is at your service. So that is coming at some point.
Interesting. You learn every day. Thanks, Ida.
This was my doing, actually, so that's why I happen to know. I just didn't want to steal your thunder. I thought you were also informed.
No, I wasn't. But that happens. This things was very fast internally, so catch up as you go.
All right. Well, actually, that brings up to the end of this AMA. Hopefully, we answered your question. Hopefully, this time around, I didn't skip any questions. I tend to do that. If I did that, then I apologize from the bottom of my heart. Is there anything that you want to add Any final remarks from our beautiful DevRel team?
Time passes by fast when we have fun.
Doesn't it? Indeed. All right. Well, it's been a pleasure having all of you on. See you again in 2 weeks. Same time, same channel. Actually, see you again in a bit more than a week, because there's also going to be a community call next week, which is a bit different. It's a bit less tech focused, but it's very interesting nonetheless.
If you have any other questions or follow-up questions or any of that, come ask us in Element. Come say hey there. I'm not Discord. Especially with that question.
Exactly. So Max is doing God's work of shilling our Element channel, which is a really important channel, and it's going to become increasingly important. Element, our Matrix server, I should say, is the place for a core community to hang out. So we would assume that most of the people who pop up on these DevRel AMAs and community calls are part of our core community. So you're very much welcome on the Nym Element server. Hopefully a link will be dropped to the server in the chat, and you guys can join, and then we can hang out there. And hint, by the way, you have way easier access to the core team there, because we also use Element for internal communications. So if you want to get hold of anybody, including myself, your best bet is Element.
We now run it over mixnet, so you can go completely private on all levels. Drop in the link how to set it up.
Oh yeah, actually I almost forgot. Thanks for that. Yeah, so Matrix now works over the mixnet, which means not only it is a private messaging service, but also can enjoy the network level privacy provided by the mixnet. Pretty cool little package. Now, with all of that said, this time for real, I'm gonna say goodbye. There is a PO-up for this DevRel AMA, so you can DM this lovely gentleman here. So if you want a PO-up for this and you want to commemorate attending this this very prestigious event, then make sure to check this out. I will say goodbye now. Have a lovely day and catch you next Friday. Bye, everyone.
Ciao, guys.
Bye, guys. Bye, everyone.
Bye.